morning. I hope everyone has had a wonderful conference so far. My name is Rosie, this is Brenda, and we will be talking about different learners and different lessons, developing a toolkit for students with specific learning differences. So we're going to start out today just talking about what is a specific learning difference. So here's a gigantic, huge definition. And as you'll see, the term specific learning difference is an umbrella term. It includes many, many, many different learning differences. So as you look here, it's really students who have difficulty acquiring information. And the reason why they have difficulty acquiring information are due to these different learning differences: dyslexia, dypraxia, attention deficit disorder, dyslexia, and specific language impairment. And then we also have ADHD. So here's a little slide to show you what these actually mean. When you think about dyslexia, it's actually having problems processing numbers. So it's what some people say it's dyslexia with numbers. Then you see that acquisition of literacy skills, which is dyslexia. It's also known as an eye tracking issue, and also a phonological disconnect. Then you have dypraxia, which is coordination and movement coordination. And then you have specific language impairment, which is often put in the same category as dyslexia, but this usually doesn't show up until you're studying your second language. And so specific language impairment and dyslexia are very, very similar. Then we have ADHD, which is attention deficit disorder, and finally Asperger syndrome, which is social interaction, and it's on the lower end of the autism spectrum. So these are all grouped together because they have similar ways of accommodating, and they also have similar ways of causing difficulties to acquire information in a second language. Will you change the slide, please? So one thing I always like to start with is the statistics. And the statistics say that for every one student, or for every 10 students, there is one student with a learning difference in your classroom. So if you have a classroom of 20, there will be 2 students that have a learning difference. And if you continue to do the math, you can see that these may or may not be diagnosed, but for every 10 students, we have 1. So the larger our classroom is, the more students with learning differences we have. And also, we need to remember that of these students, there is co-occurrence between these learning differences. So of those 2 students, if you have 20, 70% of those students will have more than one learning difference that will appear when they're acquiring a language or in other parts of their studies. So co-occurrence is really, really common. And the reason why we always discuss this when we bring up how to help students with learning differences is that these are umbrella terms. And really, the way we accommodate and support learners is very, very similar, and that we don't necessarily need to look at each learning difference and say, oh, you have this, or oh, you have this, to actually be able to accommodate and help. So these are blanket term definitions. So in order to fully understand our role as educators, we need to think about what our students with learning differences endure in the classroom and what it feels like to have a learning difference.
Okay, good morning. So we're going to do a little activity. What I wanted to do is, can you get closer to the person that is next to you? If you are far away.
If you're far away, you might want to move up closer,
Yes.
because you're going to have to read a text.
Yes, you're going to have to read something.
Because we want to give you a simulation of what it actually feels like to have a learning difference.
So get closer to someone.
Move up, back row. Stand up, move up. I'm going to go up there. I'm going to go.
Okay, so what you're going to do, don't go. What you're going to do with the person next to you is you're going to put your hands like this. Put your hands like this. And the person who has the largest hand, like Rosie, the person who has the largest hand, yeah, she's like a monster, don't. It's going to close his or her eyes. Close your eyes. Sorry. And the other person is going to try to read a text to them, okay? So we're going to put the text now, but before we put the text, go. This is how you're going to read the text. Every time you see a Q, instead of reading it as Q, you're going to read it as D or T. Z, it's going to be M, PB, BP, YS, it's going to be ER, A, it's going to be E, E, it's going to be A. Okay? Okay, let's see if we can do it.
Are you guys ready, or do you
Are
need
you
a couple
guys ready?
minutes to look at the directions?
Yes?
Ready?
¿Puedes poner la otra que se vea la siguiente en la pantalla? Si no funciona, no importa. Sigue. Okay. Okay, so this is what you're going to read.
So, people like me, cover your eyes with the big hands.
And I'm going to start reading to Rosie. For example, we begin our trip. So start reading to the person next to you.
And please, people with the bigger hands, cover your eyes, else we're going to come do it for you.
Yes, they cannot put it, both of them. Try. Try it. No, try now. Try now.
Who has the bigger hand? Okay, who wants to go first?
Try now.
Okay. Who has the bigger
Rosie, I see people not doing it. They're not getting it.
Should we do the other one?
No. I think that we should stick with this one. I hate this. I really think they cannot do it.
Oh, but I think they're doing a good job. Look
No,
at
I don't
them.
think they're doing a good job. I think they're not doing it well.
It's okay. Let's just give them a couple more minutes.
No. They need to finish. This is English. It's not that difficult.
Oh, but they're trying so hard.
No. I
Which
don't
one?
see people trying.
Brenda, be a nice teacher.
No.
Will one of you cover your eyes, please? We have an angry co-teacher. Nothing. Should we change partners now?
Yes. Okay. Now, time. Now we're going to change partners. So the person that was covering his or her eyes is now going to open their eyes, and the other person is going to try to read. Let's see if you can do it better than the other people, because they were not really doing
Brenda.
it well. So let's see if we can do it. You have 3 minutes to finish. Hurry up.
We can give them 5.
No.
5.
Nope.
5.
Nope.
Please. Can you put it back on the screen? Okay, who is covering their eyes this time? Okay, now, okay. So how about you start where your partner left off, doing the reading. Will that help? So,
Rosie, this is not working.
Brenda, we're English teachers. We're supposed to be nice to our students.
No. They are not very intelligent.
Wow. That's your teacher voice, huh?
That's my teacher voice. Okay, I said 3 minutes, but sorry, we ran out of time. So, that's it.
Okay, let's move forward. Do you have any recollection of what you just read? Sort of. No. Any other answers? Do you remember anything? Do you remember what you were reading about? What was that?
A familiar place, like our body, I think so.
And what did you think?
Something about the ADN.
ADN? DNA, maybe? Huh. And does anyone else have any ideas about what they were reading?
Yes,
Okay, I'm coming.
Someone in the back.
Hi.
That our body was different and about cells.
All right, so there's some comprehension. Oh, mean teacher, what are you doing? Just. Okay, now my next question is, how did this activity actually make you feel? And when we think about this, I want to think about how you felt psychologically. I want to think about how you felt emotionally, and then also physically. How'd your eyes feel? How'd your face feel? What did your mouth feel like?
And also, please, you have 30 seconds to share with the person next to you. How did you feel in all these areas? And please also, how did you feel with these 4 people here? How did you feel when I say, like, sorry, I cannot put the instructions back? Are you going to give us time to do it? No, sorry. That was it. So how did that make you feel?
So the roles of the 2 teachers. Dun, 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 dun.
Okay, so 30 seconds, discuss with the person next to you.
Okay, we're going to come back together as a group in just a couple more seconds. Please continue talking just for 30 more seconds.
Okay. Okay, so let's get back to together as a group. Anyone wants to share how they felt?
Let's start with psychologically.
Psychologically, how did you feel? Frustrated, good. Anyone else?
Anyone over here?
Anxious? Traumatized, okay.
Why were you traumatized? Ooh.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, it's like, what's going on in here? They're not supposed to be mean to me in this conference, right?
I was trying to be really nice.
Yeah, you were nice, but the other teacher is mean. We don't like her, I know.
I know, I don't like her sometimes either.
Okay, it's like if I have to experiment this every day, I don't want to be at the school. I don't want to go.
Exactly. That's a key point. What's your name, sorry?
Rocío.
Rosia, that's a key point. Imagine having to experiment this every day, every moment of your school day. Because it's not only with the mean English teacher, it's with the math teacher, it's with the geography teacher, it's with the biology teacher. Somebody else says frustrated. How did you feel? Did you want the activity to end? Or did you want to have a chance to finish what you were supposed to do? Okay, if you want the activity to end, raise your hand. Were you really paying attention? Not exactly. You were like, whatever, let's finish this, let's get these crazy ladies do whatever they want to do, let's finish. But you were not really motivated. What about emotionally? How did you feel?
Sorry, I want to say something.
Yes.
I didn't feel frustrated. I felt challenged, and I
Good.
love to be challenged. And I wanted the activity to continue because I wanted to discover all of the words.
Good. That's the other side. Yes.
Very quickly. In my family, we have 2 people with serious dyslexia. And what our colleague has just said was so illustrative. Anna rejects everything. She's a singer. She won't read. She knows nothing about what's going on in the world. She hated school. Fiona is completely the opposite. She took it as a challenge. She's the best reader in the family in terms of volume, and she really makes the effort. And you're going to explain to us what makes the difference and how you can make one into the other, so I won't preempt.
Yeah, but if you ever want to add in, please.
My name's Pat Grounds.
Okay. Yes, please. Anybody else was speaking? Somebody there? No? Rosie's going to go into more detail. But let's go first to the physical part. How did you feel physically?
I want you to think about what your eyes felt like when you were trying to track the words and change the sounds when you were looking at the letters. I want you to think about your physical feelings, like were you tired, were you awake, were you anxious? I mean, we've talked about being anxious, we've talked about being frustrated, but what did you actually physically feel like? What happened with your eyes and the processing in your head?
Not. Oh, sorry. I felt like shutting down, like not wanting to read the text anymore. Maybe just to give up. Or that's what I felt.
Yeah. And how'd your eyes feel in the process? Tired. Anybody else have something to say about how their eyes maybe felt? Maybe how their mouths felt when they were producing the language?
In general, I felt like I was paralyzed. Like I was trying to do a connection, but it wouldn't work, so it was like, so.
And I think that's a really, really strong word that you're using. You felt paralyzed. So it felt like almost there was like a disconnect between what your eyes are processing and maybe what you're able to produce through your mouth.
Yes.
Anybody else have anything they want to add or share? Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna check a video. Sorry. We're gonna check a video where a teacher explains what it was like for her to be a student with dyslexia and how did she feel all the time. And I think this is very powerful because it comes from someone that is now a teacher, and how did she feel in that moment.
Learning hasn't been fun at school. The Greek educational system is based in memorization, memorizing loads of vocabulary, dates, names. So a student with dyslexia cannot really cope with all this, especially if the student is not taught in a special way. At that time, I didn't even know what dyslexic. People didn't know what dyslexia was. So that wasn't really easy. Also, I had a very low attention span. That means that during the lesson, I couldn't really stay focused for more than 5 or 10 minutes, so I was daydreaming. So when I went back to home to study, I really couldn't remember anything the teacher had explained during the lesson, so it was just me in front of a book trying to work out what it says and trying to memorize all the information by heart. A number of characteristics I had resulted in lower self-esteem. So my self-esteem was really low. That was even worse than the difficulties I had in learning. So it was not easy to make friends and maintain friendships. So I felt pretty isolated on many occasions. My organization skills were also awful. So this affected both my learning and my life in general. For example, my room was always in a mess. I couldn't find things on time. Being late at school. I mean, it's just a chain. One difficulty brought the other.
My name is Brenda McAllister. I'm a
Okay, so now we're going to actually listen to some students who are going to describe what their learning is like and where they have issues. So remember the first woman who we just listened to? She's now an English language teacher, and she's describing what it was like for her to learn a language or a second language. And now we're going to listen to some students who are university students describe what it's like to learn a language.
second year biochemistry undergraduate. Dyslexia, it's mainly impacted my writing and my comprehension, which makes it very difficult for me to learn things. It takes me longer to, I think, actually take information and actually understand it. And it's also quite difficult with subjects like maths, because I can quite frequently make errors, even though I can understand a topic, but it's just very difficult for me to sometimes be consistent.
Hello, my name is Kirsty, and I study English language and Spanish studies at Lancaster University. I think it's affected me sort of especially when I was at school, a lot, because I didn't get diagnosed until a lot later. And I felt that I was sort of stupid because I couldn't sort of like do things like the other children could. So my reading was a lot slower, and it took me a lot longer to learn things. And since being at university again, like my reading's a lot slower, so it affects it. So we have lots of reading, and so it takes me a lot longer than other people.
I'm Marcus Marcanos. I'm a student here at Lancaster University. I'm currently in my second year studying biomedicine. Outside school, it hasn't really affected me. Most of my friends were really understanding when I spelled things wrong or mixed up words. Inside school, though, I did have a rough time with spelling tests and just generally writing. History was really hard on me. However, thankfully, the secondary school I went to had a really good dyslexia department, and they helped me work through it. Basically, every day during the summer, my mother would take me at around midday and have a 2 to 3 hour spelling session just to try and improve my grasp on the words. Eventually, I started seeing patterns in how the words were formed, and I had a lot of progress over summer.
Okay, so what did you hear? Anybody wants to share what were the difficulties for these people? Yes. Sorry, someone is running your way.
What I understood is that, with at least the last man, he says, well, outside the school, it didn't affect me very much, but the problem was inside the school until I found it a good place with a specialist who helped me. And the the first one, it says, it affected me not only at the school, but also in my daily life because, well, I have my room with a mess and things like that. Right. So it means that some people is affected in some way in another way. But I think the most difficult thing is inside the school because of the academic tasks you have to do with reading and writing.
Thank you. Someone else wants to comment? I think the point that, what's your name? That Maria makes is very, very important, and it relates to what Margaret was saying. To what Pat was saying. It depends on how you address your disability. As we were saying yesterday, a disability only becomes a difference when it's addressed, when someone tells you how to deal with what's happening with you. And that someone can be someone outside, or it can be you yourself because of your personality. You start designing different ways of coping with what's happening to you and start taking it as a challenge, as Pat was saying, as our colleague was saying in the back, or you totally get demotivated. In this case, we have 4 successful people that actually managed to get through what was happening to them. So what we're gonna go now is, we're gonna see how the information is processed in our brains. So the first thing, I know you cannot see it very well. Can you put the slide on this one? Okay. On that one. Oh, perfect, on that one. Okay, so the first thing is we need to be able to pay attention. If you saw the video, what was the first lady talking about? She had a very what? She had a very short attention span. So she couldn't pay attention for a long time. She was daydreaming. So that first step was already compromised. She couldn't pay enough time attention to make it to the second step, which is encoding. So you pay attention, you process the information, you encode the information, and then you store it. So if you have problems paying attention, that's going to be a problem. Then if you have problems processing the information, understanding what are you saying, go back to what you were reading. It was difficult for you to pay attention, but then you didn't understand what you were reading. You were more focused on trying to finish the task than on really understanding the text. So that's a processing part that can cause a problem when we are trying to learn something. Then if you cannot encode it, you cannot store it. And it doesn't go to the long-term memory. It just stays here, like in the surface. And of course, if it doesn't go to the long-term memory, you cannot retrieve it and use it. So if you see when we have people with learning disabilities, all the steps are compromised. Sometimes some of the steps are more compromised than the others, but we need to be able to cater for all of them to make this disability a difference. Yes, Rosie. No problem. Can't push button. Okay, so do you want to go for that one?
So when we look at these slides, we're going to look at what are some linguistic issues that learners may have. And I'll let you read this and I'll also describe some of them. But what I want you to really think about are these are the pieces that students have problems with when they're actually thinking about language and formulating language. So you see that they may have slow speech, they may have problems articulating or with articulation, keeping verbal material in their short-term or even their long-term phonological memory. And as we go up, you see slow reading speeds, which affects intonation and how we pronounce things. And you'll see that with segmenting, that there may be problems putting sounds together. So as we look at problems that someone with a learning difference may face linguistically, this is a short but extensive list. And these are non-linguistic problems that may happen with someone with a specific learning difference. You'll see that they have a short-term span memory or a short working memory. And so putting things into the long-term memory can be problematic. They may have difficulties with handwriting and being able to change, like they may flip B for D and things like that. They may have problems with time management, as we heard in the video, or organizing themselves and creating and automatizing new skills. So when we look at these slides, these are just some of the aspects of learning that may be difficult. So again, now we're going to listen to another video with these same students and our first teacher who are going to describe how they learn.
At a young age, learning English as foreign, well, for me, it was English as a foreign language. It was a complete nightmare. My teacher, my first teacher, was just sitting at the back of her desk. We were about 13 or 15 students in the classroom. The books we were taught were really dull and boring. She wasn't making the lesson interesting at all. She was just sitting at the back of her desk trying to explain us what the book says. In the best scenario was her to stand on the blackboard to explain something, and that was it. It was, in some cases, the experience was even traumatic because, say, for example, one day she asked us to memorize about 30 or 20 irregular verbs. Obviously, it was impossible for me to learn them. Not only learn the meaning, but the spelling as well. And then obviously, I hadn't learned all this. So the following day, when we had the lesson, she called my mum after the lesson, saying how why that I hadn't studied at all, although I had spent hours trying to learn them. Obviously, my parents weren't happy with this. My teacher wasn't happy with this. And I was really amazed because I was really upset actually, because I had spent so much time working and everybody kept saying, oh, you're really lazy, you don't study. That was really, and I just felt it was really unfair. Well, when I went to university, I had to survive in the university, so I had to find ways around it to learn English to begin with, because in the first year I had to attend a foundation year when I had to take an English examination, which I had to pass with a high score. So I had to come up with my own strategies. My main strategy was to hang out with English people, watch TV, listen to the radio, read books for fun, expose myself as much as possible to real English. I went to the library, the university library, and I practiced listening skills for many hours every day. So although my auditory processing was really slow, this really improved rapidly, and I managed to pass the exam with a high score, which I was really proud of.
Okay, so one thing I want to ask you is, you heard how she created agency, how she developed her own study skills. What were some of the things you heard her talk about after she described the things that were hard? Because she went on to university and she learned how to succeed. What were things you heard?
Hi, my name is Andrea, and I heard that she created her own strategies to learn. So she started hanging out with people who spoke English and maybe watching television in English, and she said she exposed herself. So yeah, those were the strategies that I heard.
Yeah, that's perfect. She was describing how she had a short-term phonological memory and that she had a hard time putting things into her long-term memory. And so the best way that she could overcome this was just to immerse herself into the language, like you said.
Yeah, no, totally agree. That's how she, I mean, this is how it's supposed to be anyway. If you really want to learn a language, you have to expose yourself to the language and not reading all the time or being in a class. It's better if you expose yourself, you speak with people who speak the language, as you said. I think this is the best strategy.
Okay, so now we're going to move forward into this video. Did you get to the next spot? We're having lots of little issues with my computer. And we're going to listen to the...
Kind of contrasting that, the easiest part was probably memory and actually
Managed to pass the exam with a high score, which I was really proud of.
5 years of Spanish and about a year of French and a year of Arabic. It's not been very easy for me because it does take me a lot of time to learn a new language. I think the most difficult part for me was trying to transfer from my working short-term memory to my longer-term memory and actually understand what I'm learning. Otherwise, it's just syllables. It's not very, it doesn't have any meaning. So trying to actually make everything have a meaning was probably the most difficult part for me. On kind of contrasting that, the easiest part was probably things like symbols, which are abstract by definition. So, for example, in Arabic, of course, you have the writing script, which is completely different than what's used in the West. But I was able to learn that very quickly. But that being said, I'm not able to necessarily know what the words mean themselves, but the actual symbols, I kind of know how to say them, and I can try to base it, what I learn after that, off what I know then. I had to learn the language for school, so for me personally, I didn't really enjoy a lot of it because I felt like I was having to be forced to do it. But if I was, really dedicated and devoted to something that I found interesting, I think I would enjoy it quite a lot. It would be difficult in some respects, but I think it would be a nice challenge and something that I would enjoy, and something that certainly has applications in real life. For me personally, I found saving the writing to the end of kind of learning things, because I found like speaking more enjoyable and easy for me, and also reading as well. But the actual act of writing down what I've learned is, for whatever reason, very difficult for me. I've had people, like my friends, say that it's kind of the opposite for them sometimes, that they find the writing better and reading more difficult. So I think it's kind of finding what works for you. But definitely for me, the writing was probably the most difficult, so I avoided that until I understood a topic better. I found the grammar not too difficult, but one thing to kind of learn new vocabulary and try to apply is definitely mnemonics. Just as long as while you use them, make sure that you know and are kind of making an effort to know what they mean as well, because you don't want to lose the understanding, because that's key, of course. In a language, you have to understand what you're saying. You're not just talking syllables. They have meaning. I'd often kind of just speak to myself like I was having a conversation, which I found was quite helpful, because then I'm, first of all, speaking, which I'm better at than writing, but I'm also making an effort to learn what I'm saying and to understand what I'm saying.
Also, learning new words. I find that obviously when you're doing languages, you learn a lot of words, and it takes me a long time to actually finally remember them. So I have problems sometimes with tests, and so if we have a test soon after we've learnt new vocabulary, I usually score quite low. But if it's a few weeks after that, then I'm a lot better. What I found difficult is actually learning the words and sometimes getting the grammar to make sense. But I've also found that I can look at patterns a lot easier than other people, so that I can see patterns between languages, and I find that a lot easier. Because I officially study English language and Spanish, but I've also studied Catalan and Italian as well. And I find that I see patterns between those languages that other people can't. I think I have difficulty sometimes with reading, what it says. Sometimes I misread the words, and especially if I have to read out loud, because I can read okay in my mind, but reading out loud I'm quite bad. So sometimes I feel very nervous if a teacher asks me to read in front of the class, and because I'm nervous it's even worse, and I tend to stutter and fall over the words. But I find that with Spanish, at least, because it's a very phonetic language, my spelling in Spanish is a lot better than my spelling in English, because the writing system is exactly how it sounds. So I find that a lot easier. So I find that I understand grammar really well when just learning it, but it's in practice where it falls apart. When I'm speaking, sometimes I forget the grammar, or when I'm writing, I'll sometimes not notice that I've made an error until it's returned to me, and then it appears really obvious. But usually when I'm just doing the tests and being asked questions on it, I can score quite high. But then when I'm asked to do it in practice, I sometimes forget.
It was really frustrating at the beginning, because I was really annoyed at some inconsistencies that showed up. Like, I distinctly remember not being able to spell or say the word bird for some reason. It was really frustrating, and it was hard, but I got through it. It needed a lot of hard work, but I got through it. After English, my parents had the great idea to try and make me learn French. Went slightly better because I had already worked out some of the problems from dyslexia, but I never went really far in French. I passed my GCSEs and that was it. Other than that, whenever I did try to kind of pick up a new language, it never really worked out for me. I tried to pick up Arabic at some point and just never clicked at all. Like, I know 3 words, that's it now. The words just wouldn't stick to my head. Just found it really hard. Particularly difficult was the spelling. Spelling was really difficult for me. The easiest part was probably reading, because even if I didn't really make out the word, I could infer what the word was from other parts of the sentence.
Okay, so first, for us it's important that you see these videos because these are the real voices of people that are having difficulties with dyslexia. And it's the same feelings. Forget about what they were saying. How were they saying it? What emotion was happening in them? What did you see? You thought she was going to cry, exactly. So they are sad. The last guy, you can hear the defeat in his voice, like, I cannot learn a language. And this happens, these feelings are the same feelings that people with disabilities have in all kinds of disabilities. Now, what is interesting, it's also that they can put into words what's happening to them. They say, the second person says, my short-term memory, I could not move it from my short-term memory to my long-term memory. That means somebody actually explained him what was happening to him. This is very important when we're dealing with people with disabilities. It's not, oh, you are dyslexic. It's more explaining, yes, this is a label, but what's really happening is that you are having this and this and this problem. With dyslexia, with Asperger, with any kind of problems, you need to explain the person and tell them what's happening to them. Because if they don't understand it, they cannot go and explain other people what they need. It's very important that they understand what's happening to them so they can advocate for them and for other people that have the same problems.
So now we're going to start looking at multisensory tools because we want to actually give you a little bit of a toolkit. Oh no, my computer. There we go. So we actually want to start talking about a multisensory toolkit because we want to actually start describing some of the things that you may see your students having issues with. And then we also want to look at some applications that are free, low cost, and can help you actually support your learners. So multisensory teaching really goes back to what we were talking about yesterday with Gardner and thinking about multiple intelligences and putting together listening, speaking, writing, and reading with all the other pieces of teaching so that, in an essence, learning becomes multisensory. So as you look at this slide, I want you to think about what these pieces mean. We're trying to get students to learn in their second language through different pieces. We need things to be auditory. We need them to be visual, tactile. They need to have kinesthetic pathways. And we need to give them the chance to repeat the information they're learning several times and be able to build on these pieces. So we're trying to make the activities, as you would in the communicative approach, fun, enjoyable, memorable. But also we're trying to think about different sensories to channel the information to help connect it to long-term phonological memory. So, multisensory methods, what does this all mean? Well, again, if you look at the first point, it's really introducing small segments of information making sure they have the practice with the information first, and then building on those blocks. Oftentimes, as teachers, we're given large vocabulary lists, and we feel that we should have students memorize 20 words at a time. But if the sounds are similar, students are going to have disconnects. And then we also oftentimes feel like the more grammar, the better. And the more that we build on our grammar sequences, the more they're going to be able to produce the language. However, if it's not fossilized into the long-term phonological memory connected to sound, it's hard to reproduce. So multisensory places an emphasis, as you see in the second point, on the demonstration and practice of language, actually giving authentic, real experiences in the language and moving away from just using a textbook. Because we need to think about how we can assess our students in multiple different ways. When we think about assessment, oftentimes we just think about standardized tests, but that is arguably not the best way to assess our students, because really we are trying to get them to learn how to live and produce and feel in a second language, a third language, a different language. So really when we start thinking about assessment, we need to think about the tools they actually need to be able to communicate effectively. So when you look at multisensory tools, we're thinking about giving direct, explicit instruction and giving students the practice to see the difference in the phonological sounds and also to see the difference in the grammar structures and patterns. So we're going to continue to talk about what accommodation is and also some really fundamental and simple things that we all already do but we don't always think about when we're thinking about helping students with specific learning differences.
While Rosie goes through these slides, please think back on what you were listening on the video. Like, how would these strategies would have helped these people that were in the videos?
So oftentimes, as teachers, we forget that one of the greatest tools we can give our students besides learning is how to advocate for themselves and describe who they are as learners. So when students become aware of their learning styles, they're able to understand and process information better, arguably. So when you see these slides, I want you to think about those pieces because yes, this is all very straightforward, common sense information, but oftentimes we don't put it into these pieces. So when we're thinking about reading, we need to think about how it's best taught, why it's best taught this way. So it's often argued that when you're teaching reading, you need to think about how and when to teach reading. So as you see in this first point, reading is best taught after a longer oral language teaching phrase, giving students practice using the language. Let them speak first, because again, the disconnect in the phonological memory, short-term memory on a page happens when the grammar becomes too complex and it hasn't been fossilized into long-term memory. So here you see, when you're teaching them how to read, give them practice speaking first. And this helps lower what we call the affective filter or the stress in the classroom. And the length of text should grow gradually. We should never hand a student a full page when they're first learning how to read and expect them to be able to read it. So starting with short stories, short paragraphs, and letting them build on it throughout the class and throughout the weeks of the class. And then we have to think about the social and cultural pieces of the text because we need it to be interesting. Authentic text is always best taught, as we know. And then we need to think about how we're going to introduce new vocabulary, because vocabulary is one of the most complicated pieces for students with learning differences, and that is because with the phonological memory, oftentimes students confuse sounds and also definitions. So if words have similar definitions, or if one word has more than one definition, think about what definition is the most important definition for the students to understand first. Make sure that's fossilized into the memory, and then build from there. When you're introducing new vocabulary, think about the sounds that are similar. Do not introduce those words together. So when we're thinking about this, we have to think about why we're introducing the new vocabulary and the grammar, and how we're going to do it. Primarily, it's important to introduce this prior. We don't want any surprises for our students. Surprises create and raise the affective filter, makes it hard to process new information, and when you're trying to learn how to read and you're trying to actually think about not only reading inside your head or reading to yourself, but reading out loud, if you have surprises, it makes it hard to actually think about the phonological connections you have to make in order to think about intonation and speed. So pre-reading activities are essential for students with specific learning differences because it actually helps support autonomy and gives them the chance to understand the language before they're forced to use it in a context that's often stressful. So teaching sounds and spellings, I talked about this a little bit already, but students really benefit from explicit instruction. Give them the rule, show them the rule, let them experiment with the rule, and then have them reproduce the rules. Show them what the sounds actually do. So when you look at this first point, students with specific learning differences, whether it's a visual, tracking, or auditory issue, or if it's ADHD or Asperger's, these are very, very similar because producing sounds is difficult. And so when sounds are similar or spellings are similar, it's confusing. It's confusing for all of us, but specifically confusing for students who are learning a new language. And it's even more for those who have a learning difference. So teach sounds separately. Teach sounds separately, and also think about letters that are similar or look similar, like think about B versus D. B versus D, they're very, very similar, right? And if you flip them, it's confusing. So we have to think about what letters students may confuse for another letter. Back. And give students just 1 second to experiment with all these things. Let them practice with the sounds. Let them understand where the sounds are coming from in their mouth. Let them see how they produce the sounds, because really being able to move your mouth and know the placement of your tongue will help you be able to reproduce these sounds later. So again, how are we going to put all these pieces together? As you see, multisensory techniques really are helpful when you connect it to something real, right? So when you're thinking about this, how are you going to associate these words, this vocabulary, to real objects in the real world? Drawings, of course, objects are helpful. Multimedia, we're so fortunate with technology today that when we do have it, we should use it. Again, frequent review of sound letter correspondence, so it's fossilized into the mind and can be recognized. And then color coding. But the problem with color coding that often happens, I know that when we have our pens in our pocket and we're writing on the board, that oftentimes we color code. But we don't always color code the same words the same ways, or we don't think about grammatical structures in those ways. If you're going to start color coding, make sure you use the same pens and the same colors to represent the same vocabulary every single time. Because otherwise, it will start confusing students who don't understand why you're color coding. So a verb, for instance, should always be green. And maybe an article should always be red. But these pieces really help helping students build patterns in the language and recognize things. Again, I know this isn't rocket science. I know these are things we think about all the time as teachers, but we have to think about them in relation to students with learning differences. So when we're teaching vocabulary, students learn best when they receive multisensory instruction, obviously, right? When things are layered together. And so really, students are most successful when they are taught the phonological form that's most frequently used. So what is the most frequent meaning of the word? And why are we teaching the word? Also, this goes back to irregular verbs and words that change. If there is a verb that's irregular and there is a verb that is not irregular and they're not going to have as many problems with that structure, introduce that first. Give them that favor. Let them learn how to use irregular verbs later. Yes, we have lots of irregular verbs in Spanish and in English, but it's necessary that the students understand why they're learning this vocabulary. Going to the third point, less common meanings, spellings, and syntactic characters should be taught once the form meaning has, or form map, the mapped form has been met. Why? Again, because we're trying to get it into the long-term phonological memory bank so it's usable, applicable, and can be applied. After that, and only after that, are these other pieces useful. And so teachers should remember that they should check the students' spelling errors in order for them to be able to stop and not put these into the memory bank. And yes, this is a hard piece. We have lots of students. Sometimes we have 40, 45 students. We have 50 minutes in a day. But these little pieces help students memorize, help students be able to apply. And remember that with people with learning differences, once they have the spelling fossilized, it's really hard to disconnect that. I mean, it's hard for all of us anyway, but it's specifically harder for students with learning differences. And now we'll talk about teaching listening. Some students with SPLDs have difficulty with when you look at this first point, what I'm trying to say is they have a hard time recognizing and telling the difference between different sounds. Ba, da, ta sound very similar. And so if you think about, and then with the vowels, especially in English, we have how many vowels? A, E, I, O, U. And we have, what, 15 vowel sounds in standard American English, and about 17 in British English. So if we're thinking about stabilizing sounds and introducing sounds, we should really think about how we do that and how we introduce this information. Because if we're introducing sounds that are similar, it's going to be very complicated and it's going to be hard. So lower level learners do best with audio, or once they contain a low number of words, and that way they cannot confuse them and that the sounds are different. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about this slide. I guess we have to do listening exercises that are shorter, because the longer pieces become too complicated, and not because I can't continue to concentrate or continue to remember, but like it's better to focus on the shorter pieces and let them really learn that before we move into longer utterances. And again, teaching listening. When we talk about multisensory tools, it's really useful to make sure that there's a context and there's pieces involved with helping them learn. So oftentimes as teachers, we love visuals and we love connecting learning, but sometimes we don't always think about the why. Well, here we go. Here's the why. Film, webcasts, podcasts, photographs offer students additional support to connect it into the mind map, to actually create a visual and connect it to the real world. So we also have to think about creating different speeds of speech, slower, faster, gradually. And there's lots of applications, as you'll see in a second, that support this and are free. And also, when we're thinking about teaching listening, we need to think about how we're going to introduce listening. Are you going to introduce it alone, or are you going to introduce it with other activities? Well, for me, I really believe that we should focus on listening first and then start connecting it to the other pieces. Why? Because we want to start with the first piece, which is actually hearing. And then we want to connect it to seeing and hearing. And then as we build those maps, it becomes more panoramic. And speaking, teaching speaking. So some learners have challenges with the retrieval of words, as we heard our speakers and our students talk about in the videos. They have a hard time retrieving, so just because they know what the word is doesn't mean that they can always pull it out when it's time to talk, right? They're like, what is that word? And then when they're trying to use it, even though they can hear the word in their head, it's really hard to reproduce, especially with more syllables and that sounds that are similar. I've had plenty of students who have had a really, really hard time with this, because how it sounds in your head and when you hear someone else say it and how it sounds when you say it is completely different. And so the phonological disconnect becomes very, very evident. So when we're thinking about this retrieval of words, we have to remember that pronunciation is difficult and that we have to place words into different grammatical structures in order for students to learn best. So when students are learning, we need to break down the task into step-by-step pieces. Large texts of instructions are confusing for everyone, especially me. So please think about how you're going to actually explain the instructions. Keep the chunks of information short and make the activities very, very scaffold, because this will allow students to be able to put together the information, apply it, and then if there's a moment where they're having some sort of memory disconnect, phonological disconnect, they'll be able to go back to the steps, see what they've already produced, and then be able to continue with the task. Finally, small groups allow students to gain self-confidence and awareness. So Group work, pair work is essential for this idea of teaching from a multi-sensory perspective, because without it, students actually don't get real life experience using the language. The more comfortable students are actually producing the language, speaking, talking, the more comfortable they're going to be with writing and reading. Generally speaking, with students with learning differences, speaking is the first skill that they're actually able to develop and develop well. Then comes writing, then comes reading, or you can flip those depending on the student. But primarily, they become more comfortable actually learning how to communicate, because that's the goal in a language, and also that's what breaks down the phonological barriers and the short-term memory barriers that often are convoluted and hard for students with specific learning differences. And I want to also say that if we can do anything to help our students, we need to really think about reducing their anxiety in the classroom. We're very fortunate as foreign language teachers that we have an interactive classroom if we choose to. We're supposed to focus on listening, speaking, writing, and reading, and we're supposed to make it as interactive as possible to engage students. So when we employ things like the communicative approach, multisensory teaching, and tools such as technology, we're supporting all of our learners, because at the end of the day, the reason why this topic's so important and the reason why we're all here today is we believe in our students' agency, and we believe in the right for every student to be able to acquire information and learn. So we're going to start with this little academic toolkit that Brenda and I have put together. And it might be a little complicated for a second because we're jumping between two computers, so we can actually show you some of the applications.
Okay, so as Rosie was saying, there are many apps on the internet that you can use to support your students, not only students with learning differences, but all your students. The problem is, as you can see, there are thousands of them, and not all of them are free. So what Rosie and I have done today is we have selected some of them that we believe that can help students, that we have used with the students, that we have used ourselves, and that are free. Exactly. Now, the first thing is, yes, we know that apps are wonderful, but you are not supposed to use technology if technology is not really helping you for something. Because sometimes we say, ooh, we have a new computer, let's use it. Why? Because we have a new computer, not because there is something useful about it. Because there is a computer in the classroom. Second, the students with specific learning differences should be able to choose what kind of apps they want to use or what kind of technology they feel more comfortable using. And the third one is not all students all the students with or without learning differences have to try and check which of the applications and which of the technology that we're going to show works best for them. Not all of them are going to like the same thing. That's why we have different tools for that. So the first thing is word processors. Word processors is worth. Why are they useful? Because they help students with learning differences to check spelling, to check grammar. And of course, if you have visual impairments, you can make font larger or different colors. And this reduces the anxiety and the cognitive effort that they have to put when they are writing or when they are reading. Second, if you remember on the video, the first lady, the teacher, was saying that she couldn't remember what she was supposed to do. That happens to all of us. Sometimes we don't remember what we're supposed to do. But for learners with specific differences, since they don't have long-term memory, they don't recall what were they supposed to do, and their organization skills are not very good. So these are some of the apps that we have checked. And the one that we like the best, because it's really cute, is Remember the Milk. We love Remember the Milk. This is like, did you remember to bring the milk? Oh, I forgot to bring the milk. Yes. So this app, you can have it on your cell phone, Android, iPhone, or you can have it on your computer. It's free, and it helps you make lists of what tasks you want to do, and other people can send you tasks too. So for example, I, as a teacher, can send my students tasks that they need to do by certain time, or I can send my friends, I can send Rosie tasks and say like, Rosie, remember we need to work on this? And she accepts the task and she says like, yes, no. And she says, yes, this is where we're gonna do it. You can make lists of things depending on this is a school, this is for my house, this is for Rosie. You can check which places you have to go. And again, this is free. It works on most of the Android devices and on computers and on cell phones.
And the reason why we like this is we know oftentimes we have things like course sites and we have things like Schoology and Edmodo, but this is personalized and this really, really helps students create agency and learn how to organize themselves. And when they're having a hard time organizing themselves, someone like Brenda can message them or connect to them. Okay.
Okay, so note-taking. Why? Because sometimes one of the problems is that the students cannot actually write, and they feel nervous when they have to write something. So these apps help students to note-take and remember what they were doing. Also, for example, sometimes since the students need to remind themselves of things they have to do, they can record themselves and say, oh, homework, this is important, and it records their voice and translates it to text. The one that we really like is Google Keep. Again, it's free. We love Google. Google is our friend. And you can use it the same way you use it with Remember the Milk, but it has extra applications. You can take notes. You can store information. You can even make, as a teacher, a whole class and send it to your students on Google Keep. So they don't have to be taking notes, and they can actually pay attention to what the content is. Remember that we're talking about people that have problems doing two things at the same time, so the cognitive effort that they have to do with paying attention, writing, and putting everything in order can be exhausting. And they can also record themselves, and it's speech to text. So that helps them also if they need to write something, they can check how it is written before they write it and check if they know if the spelling is correct or if the grammar sounds right. And then, again, you can use it with Google Keep. That's the one we have that we just showed you. Wait. Ah, se murió.
And now we're going to show you an example of a reader.
We're going to show you an example of natural reader. In this case, what we're going to do is you can put a whole text into, is it working?
Yeah, he's going to get it up in 1 second. So the thing about natural reader is oftentimes students need to hear, remember, as we were talking about, and they need to be able to read at the same time. So oftentimes this kind of software that you're about to see is super expensive. I remember when I worked at Portland State University, the program that my students with learning differences would get free from the university when they left the university was about $1,000. So granted, these voices aren't perfect, but they are good. So you can see that you have a whole list of different speakers, and you can change the speed of the text so the speaker can speak faster or slower.
And you can check the accent, and you can write whatever you want to write, and they are going to read it to you. So that also helps with the phonological memory because they can actually hear what they are reading, and it's going to be marked. Okay, Rosie. Let's see if it works.
You can copy, paste, and edit text here. Natural Reader is a professional text-to-speech program that converts any written text into spoken words. The paid versions of Natural Reader have many more features.
Okay, let's do it with another speaker. We're going to go with... We're going to go with Alberto, so he's going to have a Spanish accent.
You can copy, paste, and edit text today. natural real there is a professional text to speech program that converts any written text into spoken words. Paid versions of natural real there are many more features.
I know that's not how it's supposed to sound, but let's face it, when you're in the real world and you have to communicate with other people, these are the accents that you hear. You rarely hear the perfect British or American accent.
I want you to also notice that we put the speed to 1, so we made it faster, right? So you can slow this way down, or you can make it really fast, and you can change the accent. And you can copy whole books. There's books here too. So once you get into this, the free version's great. You do not need to use the paid version, but you do need to use it online.
Okay, another thing that we want to show you is graphic organizers. These are very useful for students to work on vocabulary. And plan before they're gonna write or before they're gonna do a speaking activity. We have an example of Google, but the one that we have been using lately, it's called Mindly, and it's amazing.
Mindly. M-I-N-D-L-Y. Mindly. But we also love Coggle-it. Coggle-it's a lot of fun. If you look at this description, you can put pictures and you can make mind maps. And also, for teachers, there's free versions, and all you have to do is share your information. And we are teachers, we should share.
And flashcards. What we do is with flashcards, of course, we know as English teachers, flashcards are amazing. So we use it to help. Wait, we're gonna show it to you. So flashcards are amazing to help students develop different abilities. And in this case, they can actually learn with flashcards and review the vocabulary.
And with sound.
Pre.
So do I know or not? Yes, I know it. No, I don't know it.
Sammy.
Wait. So
Sub. UN.
Stop. Okay, so you review it. If you know it, you say, I know it, and it goes to a different place. If you don't know it, it recycles until you learn that word. And these are already made for you.
And it's free.
And you can make your own also if you want them. Can we? ¿Podemos regresar a la computadora, por favor? Por favor. Okay, so flashcards. These are, if you want to take pictures now, you can take pictures. The one that you just saw, it's a study stack, and that is my personal favorite. But the other ones are also free, and they also work very well.
And again, this is what Study Stack looks like. So I know we showed it to you, but they have pre-made cards like Brenda said, but you can also make your own cards to focus on your own vocabulary and scaffold it how you want. So these are just some of the tools we have, and we were totally willing to share these slides with you to give you all this information. And we would like to end by saying thank you for coming. I hope this was useful. And also, there is, how do you describe this thing?
Okay, this is a QR code. If you have it on your cell phone, you can scan it. You will be sent to a page where all the presentation is. If you don't have it, don't worry. We'll go back to our mails in a second. You can write to us. We're more than willing to share the whole presentation with you. We promise we reply, not fast, but we will answer any questions. And we're going to be around here if you want to talk to us about something for a little while more. So thank you very, very, very much.
On behalf of Escuela de Lengua UGED and ETC 2017, we would like to give you a small gift for sharing your knowledge and teaching us more about learning differences. Thank you very much.